Hi everyone, how's it going? Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I know we're supposed to have a snow day, but I think we got lucky and have decently warm weather, which is great. And first off, I want to thank Perkins Coie for letting us use this gorgeous space. I don't know if anyone arrived early, but the sunset was phenomenal looking outside. And then before we jump into introducing the panelists, I'll just give a quick background on myself and Datalogz. So I'm Logan, I'm one of the founders here at Datalogz. I started the company, I guess about 4 years ago now. Prior to starting Datalogz, I was working at JetBlue in IT and engineering there. And while at JetBlue, we were having all kinds of analytics, dashboards, data products produced, hundreds and thousands each month. And as our environments grew, we started having problems around cost, governance, security, scalability. How can we get answers to users quickly? And there was no tool on the market that really focused on this problem for BI and analytics. So we decided to build something to solve it. And that's the origin background around Datalogz. But now what we're doing is sitting on top of the large BI providers like Tableau, Power BI, Qlik, Spotfire, identifying where different problems in these systems exist. And now I'd like to introduce my panelists. So first we have JoAnn. JoAnn joins us from Mastercard, where she was the Chief Data Officer for 5 years there, and now she is the Data and AI Fellow at Mastercard. She focuses on governance, analytics, AI ethics, has a law background as well, and she's also a professor. And I'll let her expand on her own background here in a minute. And then Guy joins us as well as an esteemed data leader from organizations. He was the Chief Data Officer at Honeywell, as well as led enterprise data and enablement at Walmart, and has built great teams around the world working with quite a few different Fortune 500s. But now I'd like to turn it over to our panelists. JoAnn, if you want to go first and do a much better introduction than I did.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Logan. And thank you all. Thank you to those of you who had a chance to chat with this evening. Several of you have wrote me down memory lane, so thank you for that. My friend from Philip Morris, I really appreciated the chat. Because I started my career as an auditor. My first degrees were in computer science and financial accounting. And so I started my career with PricewaterhouseCoopers as an auditor. And so in that capacity, I was one of the first computer auditors. And so we were having some fun kind of comparing notes, Philip Morris then and Philip Morris today, because they were one of my clients. But my career has been, somebody described it to me as eclectic. But I think data has probably always run through it. As an auditor, you do flow charts, you look at controls, you're looking at finance. And I don't think we talked about data back then as its own separate asset. And certainly, as a financial person, I've always thought about assets, I've always thought about efficiencies, I've always thought about how can things be done better. I went back to law school, though. It was the first love of mine, and I really wanted to do it. And after law school, I wound my way, I did a lot of different things in law, but wound my way back into kind of core business, winding up at American Express, really doing process improvement work. And got noticed by the general counsel first. She wanted me to come to the law department to do that work with her team. And then wound my way up to working with Harvey Golub, who was the chairman of American Express, which was really an amazing opportunity. When he was the chairman, I worked with him and Ken Chenault. And at a time when financial service firms were consolidating and also were merging. And so I did a whole bunch of M&A work with them, evaluating whether or not American Express was going to actually grow. And there was a firm that we was close to actually merging with. I'll let you guess who that was, but it didn't go through. And I then wound up doing M&A work for the firm. And then all of a sudden, something came along that was really interesting. And Ken called me. He was the current chairman and president. And he said, I have something for you and only you. And Ken was a lawyer, and he knew I had a law degree. And it was privacy. And I became American Express's first chief privacy officer. And the reason for it was he knew I understood the company. I understood the operations of the company. I had a computer science background. I had a law background. And privacy was this intersection of law, computer science, data. And he said, this is going to be big, and nobody's going to understand it. And he handed me, of all things, a study by PricewaterhouseCoopers. Things come around in circles. And I started a program for them. Eventually, I wound my way to Mastercard. There was a family illness in there that led me away from American Express. And I built their privacy program at Mastercard. I was their first chief privacy officer. And as the GDPR became law of the land, as many of you are familiar with, it may go away this one. We'll see what the future holds for all of us that were Vice President Vance. But we had to build data processes. And so the company asked me to take on the chief data officer role because as the privacy officer, we were changing the aspect of Mastercard from being a payment processing company to really a data and technology company, really offering solutions to all of our merchants, our banks, our government customers, and eventually our social impact business, and to really be focused on the data as a separate asset. And so as the first data officer, I built out all sorts of analytics systems, all sorts of business intelligence systems, data governance, data management. And then eventually, because I did so much work externally, because I had so many relationships with regulators and other constituents, they asked me to be a fellow. And most of my work now is really influencing outside the firm, where I also do some consulting, really with organizations like the OECD, the United Nations. I would have been at the AI conference, but you all don't know this outfit very strategic. I broke my left foot early this year. And so this is one of my first events. And I have a real shoe on and not a cast. So anyway, that's a little bit about me.
Great. Thank you, Logan. Nice sitting next to you again as a panelist. And JoAnn, please share the stage with you again.
It's a story to share.
Yeah, JoAnn and I did something, gosh, 5 years ago, the International Association of Privacy Professionals. So that was a fun one back then. Guy Lehman, Logan's giving you a pretty good overview of my background. I'll just add a few quick things. My career looks logical if I look at it today, but as I was going through each different phase of my career, it looked like I was making really bad choices. So I would say that this is a very interesting space to be in. When I started in this space, the idea of data management, a lot of companies did it. It was there, but it was also considered and relegated to sort of janitorial work. It was buried in IT somewhere. And I really started to take a look. I wasn't a good coder. I said, well, let me look at the data. So the bites here. Let me think of what I can do with that. And I've really been focused on creating value from data my whole career. So that is almost 30 years. So very well versed with all the things you need to do to make that happen. Make that happen at scale, and also make that happen in a way that's sustainable, right? And I think that was our last conference that we were at. Was a big part of the conversation. Is folks in the legal profession look at CEOs as, gosh, you're really rocking the boat a bit. I said, well, not really. Our goals are the same: to protect the company, but many of us have a mindset around how to grow that, which makes it a little different. So anyhow, really pleased to be here, and I love being within my tribe and my people. People that understand this world. It's a pretty interesting space to be in.
Awesome. Well, thank you all both for those introductions, and JoAnn, glad your foot is healing from the injury. And you're not on crutches or anything for this. And so our topic and theme for tonight is survival skills for data analytics leaders in 2025 and beyond. So my first question for you all is, if you had, one survival skill that you think every data leader in the room should have, what would that be? And maybe kind of a story around why that's so important.
You go first.
I go first. Okay.
You go first.
All right. Well, wonderful. Let me see. I sort of intimated it in my introduction, and it is around being maniacal about value, creating value, business value. That has been a theme in my whole career. And at the same time, it's how do you communicate that value, right? For many of us working in data, you want stakeholders, right? You've got IT, you've got marketing, you've got finance, you've got supply chain, you've got product, legal, right? The list goes on. And if you're in a role where you want to transform and make change, you've got to be able to meet people where they are to talk about this, right? Maybe as an example, right, is, master data, right? That's important for a company, right? As data folks, you love the idea of mastering data. outside of this particular group, who cares, right? At the end of the day, you're talking to people about programs like this. You need to be able to talk to your supply chain people. So look, you need to have resiliency in your supply chain, or do that in SOIZ. Where you're talking to finance or people that are doing receivables management, things of that nature, you've got to be able to talk to them in that language as well. And the reason I bring this up is, at the end of the day, we're all budgets, right? And we're all competing for money at companies. And what you don't want is you don't want somebody that's going to be making decisions say, this is a revenue generating project and this is data governance. Gosh, I really need to make sure I make my margins and EPS this year, right? So you want to be able to put everything in context and drive value in that way. Again, with sustainability built in.
So I love all those answers. And also, I'm going to just say, I think we moved from data janitorial services to data hygiene. So I think we're stepping up. But I think one of the survival skills for data leaders is that you need to understand today, but also keep your eye on tomorrow, which is really, really hard in 2025. 2025 is like, and somebody said to me this year, welcome to 2025, where every month is its own year. And I think that is right. Doesn't it feel that way? I mean, we are only in the middle of February, and man, what a roller coaster he's in. But I think we can't build just for today or daily, right? We have to build for tomorrow, understanding the impact of today. So you have to understand your company, your organization's business today, and everything Guy said is right. But you have to build toward tomorrow. You have to build things that are going to endure, not for just today. You have to build it so that it's relevant for tomorrow. That's a really hard skill set to have, but it will make you so valuable to your firm, your organization. It's closer to what a CEO has to do than people realize, right? Because you have to, yes, drive value. You have to drive efficiencies. You have to make your budget, all of those things. But that's what every executive at a C level has to do. But really and truly, you have to understand the data and the data you need, right? And what the flat sides of it. And you have to be fixing it today for all the products and solutions that your friends and family in your company are going to want to build tomorrow. That's what you have to be able to do, and do it in a trustworthy way. Because if your company, your organization isn't sustainable, right? If you're not building your analytics functions, your strategies, your products in a way that are going to be, and I know sustainability is not the right buzzword, but if they're not sustainable, it cannot be executed into the future, your organization is going to not exist. So I'll use the accounting term. You want your company to be a going concern, okay? You want it to continue into the future.
I was going to say, can I add one thing onto that?
Sure.
I agree, and I think it also lends itself to an agile mindset. I don't want to overuse the term agile, but I've always said when signing a contract or you use software or technology, so he says, gosh, do you think this will stand the test of time? I said, of course it won't. In fact, probably in 2 years we'll look back and say that was a bad decision, or there's something better, right? And so as you're talking about the future, you've got to think about that, as well as how I put in an environment that I can be agile.
Absolutely. Because our cycle times have changed. If anything has happened during the course of my career, right, is that change cycles are much, much longer, right, than they used to be. We would do plans, right? We would do 3 to 5 year plans. We just a 3 to 5 year plan anymore. Nobody, right? We got 2 years, right, at the most. And even then, nobody's hoping you to the second year exactly. You've got this year, you've got to deliver on, and then we'll revisit as we go. This thing's change fast.
Yeah, it's funny. We were actually just asked for our sales projection through 2029. Like, I even started thinking about 27, 28. Like, I'm very much in the 1 to 2 year mindset. Or
Directionally, they want that to go up. You know that.
Yeah, exactly. Up and to the right, like all startups. And I'm surprised neither of you mentioned AI. I guess you both alluded to it a little bit. But I think with the AI summit, of course, all the innovation around OpenAI, DeepSeek happening in the world, there's a lot of things to talk about AI-wise. But I want to change the question a little bit. I think at times it's a little bit overdone in panels like this with Chief Data Officers. So I'm curious, what was your first AI project that you ever worked on? And then how have things kind of changed over the years around your viewpoints on AI?
Sure. So we were comparing notes on this when we were preparing. So I was laughing because my first AI project was actually, so I've done data and analytics for a really long time, right? We used to call it big data. Remember when it was big data? Yeah. Okay. I guess I'm nods and smiles, right? But so I can kind of Mastercard. But I remember when I was a privacy officer, I was relatively newly minted, well, I guess known enough that I got a call from two guys out of Columbia Business School, and they asked for me to meet with them at a WeWorks location because they had a new product idea and they had just launched their business, a startup. And would I meet with them because they wanted to take me through their AI startup that was actually AI that was doing document review. And they wanted to, they needed a privacy expert to actually review what their AI was doing to make sure that it was privacy compliant. Because they were trying to sell it to law firms for document review, right? Law firms do, we're sitting in a law firm, ironically, do lots of cases. They have to go through lots of documents to find the relevant information. And it was one of these early models, right, that was actually trying to use natural language processing. And so that was one of my early forays into artificial intelligence. It was a very cute, tiny little model that was very tiny and it was working, but it did have some problems with like redacting names and sensitive data and all the rest. So that was one of my first forays into AI.
So let me see. So for me, I don't want to try to use terms here that date me too much, but it was building an analytics system to arbitrage airline ticketing networks. So, and it worked really well, right? It was an example of a bunch of very curious folks taking on some of the big guys and actually making some money doing so. And that was 30 years ago. And so, very cool, very fun. Analytics has been around for a really, really long time. The concept of Gen AI obviously is kind of new and has a lot more capabilities. And I would say, like as a follow-up to what you're asking, how have things changed since then? It radically changes, right? The amount of data.
When did you get the cease and desist from the airlines?
We actually did.
I know.
However, they were more concerned with how are you doing this, right? Which is sort of interesting. So, anyway, today when you think about how you approach something like this, everything's changing from the amount of data that's available that you can ingest. You can do analysis on. We've got access now to tools that are extremely powerful, right? We've got from CPUs to GPUs, if anybody's following quantum, which is, it works today for a lot of use cases. This world is changing dramatically and drastically.
That word though, dramatically.
And then you look at things like DeepSeek.
Dramatically. I know, that's good.
It's a new word. I'm going to coin that. You look at DeepSeek, right? What did that do? It pulled back the curtain on the sort of mystical things that are happening back there and said, wow, wait a minute, you've got an open source model that can compete with some of the best models out there today. And hold on a second, price point per token is like 100 times cheaper than OpenAI. I mean, this is absolutely unbelievable, right? So when you think of those things, I look at it, and this is sort of why I didn't say AI so much in my intro, is it's becoming a commodity, right, in a lot of ways. And so, which is maybe different than how most people think about it, but with that and with the commodity, what do you do with it, right? Think of the cloud, right, 2015, right, dictums. We want to get to the cloud, we need to go get to the cloud. So told IT, go to the cloud. What did most IT organizations do? Lift it, and drop it. And then what happened about a month later, they said, oh, my IT budget's vaporized now. It's all going to Microsoft or what have you, Amazon, and Google wasn't quite there yet. But, that type of thinking here has radically changed. And so the idea now of looking at AI, Gen AI, in a way of saying, let me first think about how do I optimize my business? How do I re-engineer my business? And now let me look at how do I insert these tools in the right place to make that effective. I think that's how I'm looking at it differently. So I view it as a commodity.
Very interesting. And JoAnn, I love that your startup story started in WeWork. We actually just switched from a WeWork to a studio, which is just
Congratulations.
co-working space, but it feels like,
Congratulations. It feels like a grow out.
a little snap up. Yeah, exactly. And then from our kind of perspective at Datalogz around AI, so I think one of the biggest impacts that we're really seeing is all of these analytics, data science platforms, every kind of use case where a business user interacts with data, is they starting to have all these kind of AI embedded items for that end user. So like where one, let's say, BI report creator may have been able to create 10 reports in a month, now we're seeing maybe they create 100 reports in a month. And then I guess funny enough, the tool that we kind of see the most advanced automated AI dashboard creation is actually in MicroStrategy, where it's their founder kind of leading of, hey, it's Bitcoin focused, but they have some really cool and very interesting AI combos with BI that I think Power BI, Tableau, Qlik's, Lookers of the world are going to match very shortly. And then to switch gears a little bit, I would love a kind of hot take or something controversial to the audience and data leaders on this question, but I'm curious around either data governance, data quality, AI, or kind of any areas. What do you think most people or data leaders and companies are really forgetting about or ignoring today that they should be focused on?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a big fan of thinking of your business as an ecosystem, right? And data has, and analytics is sort of a supply chain, right? And so I think what companies can run the risk of is creating silos, right, within that supply chain. So you've got data governance over here, you've got the BI organization over here, you've got analytics over here. And I would almost argue that when you think of things like data governance and data management, you should almost look at it, flip the script and look at it from the point of consumption on back, right? How do you optimize your data management governance by looking at the outputs of your AI capabilities? Look at it from like the BI perspective. That's the perfect use case, right, for Datalogz. And then decide, hey, what data do people actually use? Where should we put our energy? Because not all data is the same, right? And so you want to be able to use that then as a triggering event to design more optimized flows and also more efficiency around data governance.
Oh man, there's so many places I can go with this. Like my problem is not answering your question. It's like, where am I going to go with this one? So many places are really broken, right? And I think that the first thing is a lot of what I said before. I don't think organizations, there's still too many times executives will approach me and say, where should I use AI? It's like, okay, what's your business strategy, right? It's like, it used to be, I need a data strategy. It's like, okay, what's your business strategy? It's like, right? So it's still the same storyline that I think organizations are still not there, right? It's like, if you don't know what your business strategy is, please don't ask me about your data strategy, or please don't ask me about your AI strategy, right? And it's like, those things should go together, right? And I don't understand why they were not planned out together, and that data is an enablement and AI is an enablement. So that's the first thing. So that's like my first crazy, like, oh my God, my tackle's still up. But then I'm so surprised at how many organizations have not paid attention to their data, right? And then they're surprised, right? The surprise factor of how many organizations, maybe not the ones that are in this room, are still surprised that they haven't done the basics on their data. And then they're surprised at the price tag up, right? And they're like, what? What do you mean I got to do that work? And what do you mean I can't just, take something in off the shelf? Why can't I bring in Datalogz? What do you mean? What do you mean I need BI? It's like, and so what's the logical sequence, right, of getting from A to B is still not clear to many companies. They do not understand how all of this fits together. And I think that that's part of what you're saying from a data governance perspective. I think it's beyond data governance, though, because I think AI governance, so even when they have all those things, AI governance is really difficult for organizations. I think when companies then, or even have all the basics done, AI governance, who should own it, right? That's a real key question that I think many organizations are trying to find out. So they have a CDO, they have a CDAIO, I think it's EIDIO, and they don't know who should own what, right? And the problem is what are the different capabilities and where do they put those positions to begin with? Do they understand their data? Do they understand the analytics? Do they understand the technology? And then where are their product people? Again, for what purpose, to what end, is part of the governance. And so AI governance requires everybody at the table and a certain amount of literacy in an organization that everybody understands the data footprint, right? So what's the level of data literacy in an organization so that people understand the data asset? It's a pretty big ask. And of course, many CEOs and boards are looking at digital native firms, right? And they're like, but they're doing it. And it's like, yeah, but they have that in their DNA. And so many other organizations were not digital first, were not data first companies, and they're still struggling with this journey. So there's still a long way to go. You see it in government agencies, at the state level, city level, never mind, I don't know what's going to exist at the federal level anymore, but the reason I bring those up is not for political commentary, because everything is connected now, right, through AI. And so what we all need to also worry about is how much misinformation is coming at us, how much disinformation, the quality of the data that we're all getting into our ecosystems, who we're sharing things with. Is our data-driven products and solutions fit for purpose, especially as they're AI-driven and AI received? I just think that there's so many issues now that are only going to get more complicated in 2025.
Yeah, I really like that first part of what you call out. Is like so many times someone new starts at an organization and the first question is, hey, give me a data strategy. And then you're lacking that kind of business strategy or what is that approach? So I'm curious, if you were starting a new role, the CEO comes and says, hey, build me a data strategy. Where do you go from that? Like, what is your approach to figuring out how do I align our data strategy with the actual outcomes that a company needs?
Yeah, so that's been essentially my job the past 6 companies I worked for. I didn't mention, but I've done a couple startups, also did a couple stints in healthcare. So I usually come in as a transitional type of role, right? You want to go, we want to make some change. And so I'm very familiar with the idea of, okay, we want to make change. Well, what change do you want? We just want change. All right, well, that's terrific, right? But let's figure out what it is that you're trying to do. And that's hard to get into. I think JoAnn nailed it, and I don't need to repeat what she said, but it's sometimes really hard to get into business strategy. Believe it or not, sometimes the cold filings are great ways to have this information. I mean, that's what's crazy. Most people are not familiar with that, companies, especially larger companies. So reaching out to people that are close to the revenue is really key. Biz development folks, strategy folks, CEO is absolutely key. I think as JoAnn mentioned, boards are now weighing in on this as well, right? So, the last several jobs, when I went into Walmart as a great example, I was team member 1 of 1. So my job was to create their enterprise data strategy and also the team that actually enabled that. And so I really quickly went to create some bodies that needed people and budget, which was great. But second to that was figuring out exactly what it is you need to build. And I think what's also critically important is you've got to be really honest about where you are today. And companies sometimes don't want to do that, right? When you open this up and you look at the attic of broken toys or whatever, it can be a mess at some companies, right? And so you've got to be able to look at where the aspiration is, right? Gen AI has gotten everybody all hopped up and excited, right? Me too, right? Salesforce, if anybody follows Salesforce, they had Benioff just, announced they had 30,000 openings for software engineers, data engineers. They closed every one of those roles and are using AI agents for those roles. I mean, that is crazy, right? Very cool. But I think to JoAnn's point, they're in that position because they've been doing AI. They've been doing generative AI for the better part of 15 years.
But I think that's also one of the other ways you can approach it. But you can look at a case study like the Salesforce, and they've understood their business strategy, they've understood their data strategy, they've understood how to apply AI, and they're doing it, right? And so I'm going to change maybe my answer a little bit to your question and say, So what are the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, right? So yes, I think there is this situation where there are those companies where they do not have their business strategy, do not have their data strategy, do not have their AI strategy. But then I think there's the rest of us that are somewhere on the spectrum, right? That we have a business strategy, we have some of the data assets, ready to go, and then we're trying out AI, whether it's on the defensive side for efficiencies, or we're beginning to do product enhancements, or we're seeing companies now really deploying it, right? So what's going to happen this year? You're going to see more agents, right? And you're going to see your CEO and say, what are we doing for agentic AI, right? So that's going to be the next cliff, right, of pushing forward. And where does that apply and where does that fit? You can't just start sticking co-pilots in everywhere either, right? So where does that fit? But that's going to be really important. For every AI deployment you do, you better be able to do an ROI. I think that's where Datalogz can really help, right? What's your ROI on, return on investment? What are your metrics for everything you're deploying? Trust me, your CFOs are really going to be under the gun now as government funding is going to shift. The economy, we have inflation, things are going to shift, and if the tariffs go through, supply chains are going to start changing. So all of a sudden, all of these AI projects better start doing some return on investment, whether on the efficiency side or on the revenue side, right? So you're going to start seeing pressure toward the end of this year that I think we have to manage. And then your data management and governance better map to that so that you can keep track of your projects in the right way. And then I think, you've got to still invest in your data, whether it's your data, the data you buy, what's your governance over it, the management, the baseline of, dictionaries, ontologies, all those things. And then I think you're still got to figure out who's responsible for which pieces of this process. And every firm's process is a little bit different because it's got to map to your business. And so what kind of data? I mean, look, Mastercard's data, as we were talking a little bit, right? Mastercard's data, Mastercard doesn't buy a whole lot of data, right? Because why? We generate a whole lot of data, right? If you think about what we do, we generate a whole lot. So we don't buy a whole lot of other data, but man, we squeeze a lot of juice out of those lemons, right? Because we can. We have other parts of our business and we want to do more, right? But that's like everybody else. So how much are you using your own? And then how much are you buying from other people? And then where are you getting that? And what are the data rights you need to really go after that? I mean, and healthcare is a completely different business than financial services, right? So those are the things I think you also have to be doing. Back to, you got to understand today for tomorrow, guys. And then again, to 2025, I think we are using data use.
Yeah, I guess it's a fitting topic and survival skills for data and analytics leaders in 2025. And one of your points you mentioned there, kind of around ROI for data leaders, how do you prove that out? When we approach a new client or customer at Datalogz, we're very focused on, I'd say, risk-averse ROI. Things like cost savings. How can we clean up tools, make them more efficient? How can we identify your old world compliance risk of GDPR, CCPA? Are there security risks, vulnerabilities in these systems? But I'm curious if you think a CDO's kind of main responsibility should be around those risk-averse type areas, or should they be driving profits, revenue, influencing kind of that other side of how do we really enable the business? I think both your backgrounds are set up very nicely, coming from the privacy side and then a team of one to probably thousands at Walmart of really thinking these through.
There's a lot in that.
There sure is.
So I think we may have some differences here.
I'm not sure. Go ahead. You go. Go ahead.
I lean, as I said very much before, I lean in the transformation side. So how do you do things different, better, faster, more efficient, things of that nature? You don't do that alone. Right? I think JoAnn mentioned this, Logan mentioned this. This is a team sport for those of us in it. You need partners in the business. You need people to adopt what you're doing. And so the idea of coming up with a sort of a coaching plan here to actually move this forward and get people to come along with you is critically important. I'm trying to remember one of the second points you had. Can you just repeat?
Around kind of risk adverse,
Okay, yes.
or around focusing on profit.
And if you think about the genesis of sort of the data roles and CEO role, right, it's a very weird role. Same with everybody here, we have a different definition of what the CEO role is. but it emerged sort of out of a risk-focused kind of need. And so a data governance type of perspective. I've always pushed to have a revenue target, right? Which many people look at and say, what are you talking about? Why would you have a revenue target? And you don't really control revenue. Well, you know what? In a lot of ways, I do where I can, right? I need to be able to have indirect revenue connection and sometimes revenue, right? Look at Walmart, right? We built a $1 billion data product, right? That's a lot of money, right? Not for a company like Walmart, they're giants, so it sounds like a lot to all of us, but you add zeros and zeros, and it's a big thing. But the idea of that forcing function is really important. That said, you have got to get alignment on the risk side, because you can't say transform and change and do it with no risk. Right? I don't think anybody would sign up for that job and know you'd be able to do it. Right? So you need to be able to, listen to the music, right? That's happening in the organization. You need to understand what the CEO wants to do. You've got to come up with your principles about what you're going to build and what you're going to do and change. And you've got to socialize that. You've got to run with that, right? So I'm much more into move fast, and yes, some things will break. And if you have the principles right, you'll have a signal when those things might start going off, and you can take a little step back and fix it. But yeah, I'm much more on the offensive side of this. That said, I've had lots of data governance teams, privacy teams, and so forth within my organization, and I tend to stress them out a little bit. And sometimes I say, no offense to the legal folks in the room, but I said, look, your job is to advise the risk, right? And my job is to help coalesce around that to say, where can we find a place that works?
I need $1 for every time somebody says, no offense to the legal folks in the room. It happened on a call I was on right before I really, anyway. So for me, I also err on the innovation side. I lean toward that side because when I became the chief data officer, the first thing that happened was my old boss, the chief legal officer at the time, Ted Murphy, sat me down and said, you're no longer practicing law. And I said, okay. And then he said to me, but you haven't forgot all your privacy. And I was like, okay. I was like, you can't have it both ways, dude, but all right. And it's true, though, right? I mean, I haven't had a lobotomy. I haven't forgotten how to be a privacy officer. But it doesn't matter because, first of all, my privacy team thought I moved over to the dark side of the business because I was part of the business teams, OK team. My privacy team was taught very, very well how to enable business because our motto, even when I was the privacy officer, was never no. It was yes, but, or yes, and, or only if you do it this way. And if we said no, there was a really good reason why we were saying no, because it was illegal and we couldn't figure out how to get to a yes. So I'm wired toward yes. I'm wired toward getting there. So that's the first thing. I'm wired toward we should be able to do it. And we would not have had our entire Center for Inclusive Growth if I didn't figure it out. I can remember when Shamina Singh and our vice chairman at the time, Walt McNee, came down to my office and said, we want to figure out a way we can use our data for social impact and research. But do you think we can do that? And I was like, the answer should be yes. And they both said, we thought you were going to say no. And this was when I was a privacy officer. The answer got to be yes. I don't know how, but we'll figure it out. So you got to figure it out. Now, I'll agree, you got to use the privacy officer. You got to use your CISO. Like there's also people who want to steal your data, right? You're going to partner with everybody, and you got to keep it safe. And we're regulated, so there's laws and there's all sorts of limitations. But I think the best CDOs understand that they are there to navigate the risk, but their job one is to get to that yes. And for every person who comes to their office and says, JoAnn or Guy or whatever your name is, I need data to do this, that your job is to figure out how and what data you have and whether it's fit for purpose and is it good enough and how many gaps it has and is it full of personal data or what's the problem with it? Because there's going to be a problem with it, But to figure out how it gets to be of good enough quality and then what's the analytic and how do you get there, all of those things, that's what a data officer does. and then figures out the guardrails and the requirements so that you don't share, if you're a financial company like mine, raw data, you don't get involved with the, the FFIC when they come in to do our exam, you don't fail the exam, that people still trust Mastercard, that they still believe that, we have we're accountable and transparent and have integrity, and all of our data principles are still alive, and that people still don't want to cut up their Mastercard on the 6 o'clock news. Like all of those things, no, I mean it. Like you take all of that into account so that when somebody comes to you with a stupid idea, you can say to them, can we think about this and go through the data principles, and now you tell me how you're feeling about it. But innovation should be absolutely the reason the job exists.
Can I add on?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're right on. And I think a couple of themes that you're hearing here is you need partners in the organization, right? You can't do this on your own. As I said before, it's a team sport. In certain roles, some of my favorite partners were chief legal counsel as well as a CISO, right? And product team and so forth. But you need a core group of folks here within an organization that you can talk to, you can throw ideas to. I don't want to say that they have your back, right? But you're actually proposing things so people aren't getting surprised. So you can have that sort of
And it's all
trifecta.
more important with AI and Gen AI, right? Because, you can get outputs from this system all day long, but is it the right outcome? Are you solving the right problem? Are you finding the problem right? You can do all the red teaming, A/B testing, all of it, right? And you can still wind up with an output that doesn't match your outcome, right? It's like, you got to ask those questions, and you need other people around you to say, I see this, and I know we got there, but is it really right? And should we be doing it? And is it the right answer for the customer population we're trying to answer for? Those are the things where, and also have peers at other companies you can call, right? I mean, there's nothing more valuable than having a community of people that you can call and say, I've got this thing, and, and not your competition, obviously, but I've got this problem, and this is how we're approaching it. What do you think? Because a lot of the stuff we're all doing is brand new. Nobody else has done it before, right? I mean, and everybody in your firm is thinking, heck, you're it, right? JoAnn's got it, right? It's like, oh, great, right? You go home that night, you're the one at 3 a.m. sitting up going, is that right? Is that right? I gotta look at that, right? You're the one that's getting up then at 3:30 and putting your computer on, right? And logging in and looking at it again because you've got a presentation the next day and you're thinking, something's hinky here. My sixth sense is saying, I don't know, right? And many of you are nodding at me. And so it's a hard job, guys, right? And it's only gonna get harder.
And when I did, sorry, one more item is you need a forcing function as well, right? And so when we were talking before about revenue focus, direct, indirect, etc., you need to adopt the solutions and build it, right? So how many times, I know I've done this, I do this much less now, but you build something and the business doesn't adopt it. And calling and saying, come on, we just did all this work, you're not adopting it. The idea of the forcing function of saying, let's have joint goals. Good. You can have head of marketing, when you get whoever, we're going to have joint goals in this. And we're going to make sure that we are working together to put it in place, course correct or tune it as we need. There's none of this throwing things over the fence, right?
Well, and let them have as much prejudice they want.
Who cares?
Right.
Who cares? And that, going back to the communication side, is huge.
Because trust me, if they believe they have a win, they will give you all credit anyway. They will stand up there. They're stand-up people. They will give you the credit anyway.
And just one last comment. I'm sorry, Logan. Also pick your partners, right? Especially if you're in a nascent company trying to build out strategy. Don't look for the hardest place to solve for. Find the people with high readiness to partner with. Find their problem, get it done. And you know what? People are going to send you emails. I want it, I want help. Communicate, right? And so there's a lot to looking at the company and the readiness, right? Because we all say, gosh, we all know all this stuff to be there. Well, why aren't we there now, right? Understand where you are. It's a team sport. You know, forcing functions in place, and you have a pretty good shot of success there.
Yes, I think we're in agreement then on kind of innovation, driving revenue, driving impact at the business. And JoAnn, you mentioned that being a CDO is a hard job. And
Fun job too.
fun job as well. So the average tenure of a chief data officer is only 2 years. And other executives, it's, I believe, 4.5 years. So I'm curious on what's your take on why that is? What are people doing wrong? Is it the business? Is it the newness of the industry? Why is that?
Okay, Randy Bean has written a book about this. You can buy his book. He calls me the ethical chief data officer, which I guess could be called worse things. It's because the role isn't well defined. I mean, that's the answer. Period, full stop. You need to define your role. I mean, was really fortunate in the role for over 5 years. You need to define your role. You need to explain to the organization what you do, what you don't do. But you also don't come with a magic wand, a crystal ball, right? All the things that, because people don't know what they do. That is why the role is so hard. And so if it's not defined what you have in your mandate and what you don't have. Do you have the technological piece in the role? Do you have enterprise architecture in the role? Do you have, is the analytics function part of the CDO's role? Is it federated as part of the business? I mean, there's a million reasons. And if it's not defined, and if you don't know what you're good at, and you'll get headhunter calls, but if you don't know what you're good at and what you're not good at, and are honest with yourself, that's kind of the risk if it comes to the bottom work. Now, sometimes there are plenty of CDOs, and we also know someone in the industry who have hopped from job to job to job because they want the increasing pay scale. That's also the reason that we're also very sought after. But the reality is that you also better understand who you're going to work for, what the company does, and what value you can create for that company. It's really that simple.
So this is not meant to be mean-spirited, but there are some folks that probably shouldn't be in the role, right? This is a role that has folks with a lot of business acumen, a lot of communication skills, a lot of problem-solving skills. They speak data, they speak tech, they speak deal, they speak marketing, they speak supply chain, right? So different companies require different types of folks for senior role. So I think there are a lot of folks that need to grow into the job, and so that's part of the challenge. So now we'll put that aside, because I don't know what it's as a percentage of it, not a large percentage. But agreeing with what JoAnn is saying is swim lanes aren't well defined. Who owns data in the company? People will scream and throw things around the room. I own the data. No, you don't. It's the enterprise owns it, right?
Correct. That is the correct answer over and over and over again. No one owns the data. The company owns the data. You may be the primary user of the data. You may get first rights in helping you structure it, including the dictionary, right? You may be the highest ontological user, but you do not own it. The company owns the data. Your full stop is a company asset. The same way the money is the company asset, right? The people are a company asset. It's like you may get some of it, but you don't get to own the whole thing. It's really simple once you realize data is an enabling function. It's like if you get there and then define what we own, right? And who owns the rest of it? Who's your key partners? Go have the conversations.
And that is a huge issue. Everywhere I've been, that's an issue. Ownership. Right? And there's a lot of reasons why there's silos of data, right? Because I don't want to give it up because I don't trust where it's going to go. And I kind of feel accountable.
It was funny when I got to Mastercard. I did when I was the privacy officer. I was like, who's responsible for the data, the aggregate? And nobody could answer. I was like, oh, this is going to be a long job.
Maybe just two other quick things. The scope of role, right? There's a lot of people, what it's like, you hire a new person, they're going to do magic, right? A lot of enthusiasm around Gen AI, things of that nature. Sometimes a CDO comes into a company, the environment is so absolutely complex. Their ability to actually make market improvement or drive value quickly is really, really difficult in this time. So that is usually a problem that exists with a lot of companies because that concept of driving value, they want it right away. Sometimes some environments are so complicated, so difficult that is not going to happen. And so, the idea of intestinal fortitude, the CEO wants improvements quick. You can't come back and say, look, I need 2 to 3 years. That is just not tenable, right? So I think that's certainly an issue. Budget's an issue. I know, unfortunately, several people that have taken roles as CEOs without budget. And I say, wow, you are not positioned for success, right? Or they're not serious about this role. And so I knew one person that put in their contract, employment contract, a budget number, right? So you want to be able to affect change, but you need some practical things in place to do it. And let's see. I think lastly would be organizational structure, and JoAnn touched on this a little bit. A lot of CDOs are buried, right? And you'll see the word C, right? But they're not really at the C table, and that's a problem. And
But I'm also not sure that the CEO always needs to report to the CPO, which is,
and yes, and I agree.
Because the
Every
C-
company is different, right? So as I said, I've done startups and the Fortune 1, which I think in a couple of weeks will not be the Fortune 1. So the Amazon's going to be day one. But every company is different, right? So take all this feedback in that context. But the idea of empowering a data leader is really important, right? And so I think putting a CDO in IT is maybe great if it's a new role and it's a new team and a new place to incubate, but you've got to have a regulator in which to pop that out and have them stand on their own. So I think there's a lot to the reason why this role is under a lot of stress. And I think lastly, in the year like 2000, some of you may remember, CIO the joke was it stood for career is over, because it had the same tenure, right? It was 18 months, 20 months, because companies couldn't change, they wanted to change so fast. The folks in that role really were put in that position that they couldn't really win or succeed.
Yeah, very interesting. So it sounds like CDO is a hard job, and maybe as time goes on, things definitely might change there.
but I think it already has. I mean, so I don't want to end on that note. So let's just talk about that. CDOs are better defined. I think CDOs are having longer tenure, and then that statistic is going to change radically, because the biggest challenge that CDOs had was, why am I doing all of this stuff to the data? And the answer now is because of generative AI. So I think CDOs have a meta-less thing, so I think that's what we're changing. I think there are programs now that train CDOs and they understand the mandate better, and organizations understand. So I think things are already changing. I was one of the early privacy officers. I was not even one of the first generation. I was like generation 1.5. Nobody knew what a privacy officer was. Now everybody knows what a privacy officer was. I used to walk in for those meetings and people would be like, "Oh, you're a CISO." And I was like, "No." And they were like, "Yes, you are." And I was like, "No, I'm a privacy officer." When people would say that privacy's dead, right? And I've had all the conversations. I've had such a great career. Right? It's like things are changing and they will continue to change. So I think that the jobs are, and I think that the job of AI officer now is another problematic position. What do? I don't know, an analytics staff, right? It's like there's a challenge for every job. The job is up to you as a executive to find your job, to find your career. Take step up. It's like nobody's going to do it for you. And if you're waiting for that's not.
Yeah, agreed. And I would also make the statement that there are a lot of companies that don't need a CEO, right? I mean, that's fair. The roles need to be done. So you don't get hung up on the title, right? So some companies do that. I would also say that there's a potential for the role to disappear, right? Because you're mentioning analytics, right? You're going to start getting too many people that are, as I said before, you don't want to separate that data and analytics supply chain too much or you lose track. So the idea of, maybe a chief digital officer maybe coming back, chief transformation, or something of that nature. So roles need to get done, organizational structures need to mature and change. And I would also argue, I think that role is probably not long for this world. But, 5, 10 years, I have no idea. I can see it actually continuing to change.
Right. Yeah, and our goal at Datalogz is, of course, whether it's CDO, CIO, CTO, make each of them look good and provide that tangible ROI around analytics and different BI systems. And I think we have time for one more question of mine, and we'll open up it to the audience. So start thinking of your questions. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A. So this is a product advice question around Datalogz. So right now we're very focused on BI analytics tools, the Power BI, Tableau, clicks. I'm curious, what systems do you think have a similar level of sprawl or that we should focus on tackling next?
Kevin,
Want me to go? Sarah? I'm getting thrown under the bus.
go on.
Let's see. So I think tools like Alteryx are really interesting. I think it's a great tool. It helps people get to an answer very quickly. Some companies where it might be a little complicated to get access to the data, have some custom analytics done, data flows, etc. So I think that would be one that would be really interesting. I think one of the things as a CDO, the people somebody that has been accountable for the data, my worry was always the blind spots, right? What am I not seeing? Right? I have visibility to data in a lot of places, but when you get closer to the point of consumption, you lose that, right? People are bringing in additional data sets, right? They're messing around now with unstructured data, which is awesome, but I lose visibility to that. So tools like Datalogz, I think, help, right? Because it tells you what's happening at points of consumption that you can't see elsewhere. So I think something like Alteryx would be the right one. But I also wouldn't get too hung up on a lot of the legacy apps, to be honest. I mean, companies need to move off those.
Agree. I don't know that it's the legacy. I think it is the last mile, and then what's going to be the next transformation on top of it? Right. So what's the future of that transformation? What needs to be tracked next? That's where I would be thinking, right? So how many different places now am I just get everything under control, and now I come on into one inject AI, and now I just created a whole bunch of new silos for community intelligence. I don't like that. That may be the next problem that we're creating. Right, and so that's nothing like. I don't know if it's a nightmare, but if I'm getting a lot of different agents that are giving lots of different information to my clients, and everybody's labeling it the same way, then I don't know. I know what I mean. But to me, that's the population problem. That's coming next.
Yeah, I really like that line of thought. Rather than the kind of legacy tools, is let's build for the future.
Yeah.
And what's next. So now we'll open up to the audience for questions. And I believe Tina has a mic, but if you would like to ask JoAnn, Guy, myself a question, please raise your hand, and we have time for a few.
Hi, hello, Guy, JoAnn, Logan. Thank you for all your show tonight. They are fascinating and inspiring. And thank you, Logan, for hosting this event. It's my second time here in the living room, and every time I feel like it's a brainstorm in Disneyland. Actually, I have two questions after today's show. The first thing is that actually I tried several AIs like ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and sometimes I notice that they will make fake quotations and use actually fake data, and sometimes their answers are irrelevant. So if you want to place AI in a real context world instead of just training them with clean data, how do you think AI will or they should handle this kind of these big issues? And I have several questions to JoAnn. Currently, I'm a financial analyst with 2 years experience, and actually it's astounding that they can give me 10 financial reports within 10 minutes. So what's your suggested core competence that you think financial analysts like me should have to apply AI in our job to assist us instead of being substituted by them? Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, let's start with the first question, right? So AI is getting better, right, and different, but I think we have to be careful that we're not just thinking of the large language models for generative AI. And so what I would say is all of the public models, right, have some utility, but they're not perfect. And it depends on what you're asking of them, right? And so I use them. I use them just to get started on things, but I do not rely on their answers. I really don't. the citations are really problematic, and there's been lots of different studies on the citations because, and I teach, one of the things I didn't mention is I teach at Carnegie Mellon and I teach at Pratt Institute, and it's a real problem for students, right? And I'm actually taking a class now, I'm a student right now in the program, and they want us to use generative AI, and I'm like, oh, that's great. Thank you so much. And so one of the challenges is that the citations are wrong, right? And as a lawyer, it's what? And there was actually I think a case that was out there for a while where a lawyer tried to use AI and all the citations were wrong. It's like, you're a genius and I can't read that. I have to leave with my firm. So you really need to actually do your own research, right? That is sort of what I also want to caution everybody with generative AI. It's funny because I get questions because I do teach people saying, what should my child major in? And my first, it's like the same question as, what should I do? Where's my data strategy? It's like, what is your child interested in? And right, it's like, because what our domain knowledge is more important now than ever. Okay, that's the first thing I want to say to all of us. Like, your domain knowledge is really important. My privacy knowledge is more important than ever, right? Because I'm just using that as an example. Why? Because when I see the citations or my AI regulatory knowledge, as a lawyer, is really important now because I can tell that the citation is wrong, it's incomplete, that doesn't make sense to me, that's not the South Korean law, it can't be, there is no law in Chile right now, right? All the citations that they're listing, I can do my own discovery. So that's the real answer to your first question. The financial analyst, right? Of course you can use it to combine things. And yes, you're right to be afraid that the lowest common denominator task, you should be suggesting how that can go away, right? So just like the document retention, document review software that very first young pups from Columbia were creating, what can AI do? What are those tasks to free you up to do the actual analysis? To the actual comparisons, the actual thinking of, yes, you may be comparing 10 different reports, but what is the actual thinking of, wait a minute, here's all the comparisons, great, but what is it telling me? What is it saying to me about the ROI? What is it telling me about the trends? What other information should I be adding in now to create a report, and you can now go get that data, to actually create a report that has way more meaning than anything we've created before? That's how you're going to add value, right? The tool is going to help you with the work, and that's actually the best use of generative AI. When we're not just using the querying large language model tool, we're actually using it to combine and synthesize large amounts of data. It's really what healthcare is doing better than any other sector right now, is finding those insights that we can then go and explore as humans, right? That's what you need to go do so that you're not disintermediated, which is what we're all afraid of. But we're actually going to be allowed to do other things, but we have to remember what we're better. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, I think your first point as well on kind of hallucinations within AI is very real. I was at a coffee shop not too long ago, and there was someone working on a math test sitting by me. And I was kind of looking over the shoulder what's happening. They were screenshotting the questions from this math test, plugging the screenshots into ChatGPT. ChatGPT would get the answer wrong, and then they'd go put it in their test, hit submit, and it would say wrong. And they were going back and forth with ChatGPT instead of just learning the actual information. And so I imagine those kind of simple examples like taking a test. There has to be so many out there and gaps currently from the models, but of course they're improving every single day.
I had an experience there with a co-pilot. I was on a conference call, and somebody shared an outline that they just shared the outline. And I watched as the co-pilot gave a heading, typed up the heading in like Arabic for me. And I was like, what the hell? And now I've been to the Middle East recently. They gave me the headline, one of the subheaders in Arabic, and then I watched as the co-pilot corrected it for me into English. And nobody else on the call had that experience. And I was like, I am watching this, guys. Does anybody have? And we're all in different places. And everybody, one person was in the UK, the person who was sending was in the UK. Somebody else was in Canada. I was in the U.S. It was wild, and I was like, this is an example, though, right, of the co-pilot trying to figure out. Well, she has been. Apparently, they must have seen a cookie or something on my machine. I was like, whoa. And there's going to be all this misinformation, misconclusions. Understand that it is trying to learn from all of the data. It doesn't mean it's going to get it right.
And I'll just, real quick, first off, I apologize because my bag has maybe been to the side of the room. Sorry for that. I think it's a great question. I think it's been answered, and I would say, don't fear this, right? Use it as you use it as a tool. And, oh, by the way, it's got problems, but is it good? News track time, 26 months, right, since the news launched. Well, that's a really short amount of time, right? It is improving all the time. And I have helped my daughter with some finance questions. She's in college. And I've used ChatGPT for this. And it's interesting. They've improved dramatically in the past 2 months there. But keep thinking about the change. And I think, it's like what JoAnn said. Knowledge of your industry, of your business, is not really going to get replicated that easily, right? So use the tools to give you an edge and also to help you, build out and learn some of your expertise.
Awesome. Yeah, next question. Looks like you have someone picked out already, and then there's one here next as well.
Good evening, both of you guys. Thanks for the great information tonight. A quick question regarding, you mentioned that data owner is the enterprise, and I completely agree with that. But when we do internal, external audit or penetration testing or any kind of other, regulatory department requirements, then we say, this is the application, or that's the data owner, this is the system owner, blah, blah, blah. That even in CISSP and CISM had a lot of questions, with the system owner, with the data owner, with the application owner, all those things, right? The concept actually showed that, this is the data owner, but actually data owned by the enterprise, all the assets are owned by the enterprise. So what would be the appropriate definition for that makes sense in every aspect? Second question is, both of you guys were in the data-related field for a long time. There are a lot of regulatory lack still now about the AI. What do you guys see that how the AI can evolve in all these data policy, privacy, governance, and data quality and everything else in the future? And in aspects of internal data, external data, or the silo data. I don't want the big explanation, little summary would be fine.
And we take the data owner question. Like to take the second one. There you go. On the data owner question in the system, right? I think there is an issue with data owner in the system owner, right? Who owns that system, right? I think that we have grown up in an era where ownership of systems is oftentimes because they built the system, they're going to fund the system, right? So there's a methodology that companies have come to on ownership of systems because we need somebody who is going to fix that system, own the requirements of the system, they're going to own the security of that system, and they're going to pay for it, right? And then what we tried to do is create data owners for the people who run that system. The problem is that usually those systems run across organizations, right? And so it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so what happens is that is the problem. However, the quality of that data, you can have a data quality owner, all right? And then you can have all sorts of data users who use the data out of that system. And that is, therein lies the problem, right? And so you cannot have usually one data owner if it is a system that is used by multiple parts of your business. And so our transaction data is a perfect example of a type of data that runs across Mastercard, right? You can imagine that my fraud team thinks it's their data, right? And you can imagine that my marketing team, that's probably a bad example, but you can imagine my cyber team thinks it's their data. And you can imagine that my econometric team thinks it's their data. And the loyalty team thinks that it's their data, right? It's all of their data. But there is one team that is working on the quality of our transaction data to make sure it is of good quality for all of those purposes. So we can't have one owner. I can have an owner of loyalty, I can have an owner of fraud, all of the uses, those downstream uses, but it can't be at the transaction level, because otherwise I need one team that's going to work at the architectural level. So you have to really think of it differently from an architectural level and a usage level. That is one of the challenges that you have to figure out depending upon the structure of your company and the structure of your data. I'm sorry I can't be more specific than that, but you have to think of it that way. Make sense?
Yeah, I'll maybe just add on words are really important, right? And the concept of ownership is usually what triggers me. And so that's usually where it's the concept of it's an enterprise asset like anything else. But by the way, JoAnn and I were chatting earlier, and you can't put the value of your data on your books, on your balance sheet, right? Which is crazy nowadays. Right? There are companies that have literally billions of dollars of value, billions in their data assets, and they're not part of the balance sheet. So anyway, different topic, but the concept of ownership is meant to say, look, it's an enterprise asset. Now there are people that are accountable for it, right? Is this data that you've curated yourself? Right? Is this system-generated data? Is this data from a third party, right? And I think all of those have different types of owners. You've also got, folks that are accountable, and you've also got data stewards. So I think it really depends upon the type of company you're in, the size of company, problem you're trying to solve. But it's really the concept of saying, let's break apart this concept that you own it and you control it. Because that's just not getting anybody anywhere.
Awesome. I think the second part of your question on kind of the regulatory side of AI and data. Actually the first startup that I founded was a regulatory compliance widget for CCPA and GDPR based on what state you're in. And we ended up not making it because legal costs were very high and I didn't have a lot of funding or money at the time. But JoAnn, I'm curious your perspective as a lawyer on kind of those all kind of policy related to AI and what you think should be in place.
What should be in place and what is in place, right? So, the challenge is that if you understand, there is a problem with the regulations in that what you put in place, what you have created with AI is probably not what's going to be audited, right? That is one of the challenges, right? Why? With generative AI, it generates, it changes. But what you do need to track is what have you created and why. What were the decisions? What was the governance that you used? What were the methods you used? What was your how was it created? And that is what you need to share with the auditors, as well as what is being executed and created today. The challenge is going to be, they come in a year from now and you created something a year ago, right? You have everything that you did a year ago and it was very valid, but what happened in the interim? Well, what was your governance over the drift, over the changes? Was it still coming up with outcomes within an acceptable range? Those are going to be some of your governance that you're going to have to demonstrate for what has been generated between the time of inception and the time of audit. That is where nobody has really been clear about the generative nature of the tool and what is auditable. That is one of the challenges that none of the regulators have actually answered. Well, it's to be determined a bit, but I would argue that whatever you've created, you better be able to defend and document and show that you've done all of the due diligence during that initial creation.
Awesome. Thank you both for the answers. I think that's about all the time we have for the Q&A, but Guy and JoAnn, I see we'll be sitting here out for a couple of minutes if there's any other questions you're trying to get in. But yeah, I just want to say thank you all so much for being a part of this panel. It was a great discussion and great kind of learning your perspectives on things like this. And then in a second, Tina will be announcing the winner for the AirPods. But before she does that, just a few kind of other housekeeping updates. So from the Datalogz side, we're going to be at the Gartner Data Analytics Summit in Orlando. So if anyone's there, please come stop by our booth and say hi or let us know. We'd love to meet. And I think we're planning an event there as well. And then we're also going to be at the Fabric conference. So that's in Las Vegas. So if there's any major Power BI, Fabric people here, we're going to be there as well. And then I just want to say thank you again to our panelists as well as the Perkins Coie team for letting us use this amazing space. And now Tina, if you want to announce the raffle winner, but before we do that, we also have our State of BI report, which Intake Media, Steven, who's also filming the event, him and his firm completed about 50 different data leader interviews to understand, hey, what are the biggest trends in BI? What's happening in the industry? How is AI actually impacting that? So we have early access here tonight to get kind of the first sneak peek preview and some very interesting things from companies around the world, their input on what's the future of AI, BI, analytics, and how's that shaping up in the industry. Now, over to Tina for the raffle. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Guy.
And
Sorry.
this,
I want to make just one comment and just echoing something that JoAnn said earlier is, I love this space. I love the work I do in this space. Right, as I said before, we're all part of the sort of the same tribe. These are many people. Right? We're talking to, from the inside, talking to the challenges we're having. But make no mistake that we love this space. We love these jobs. We understand it's hard, and that's what draws us to it. So I would say it's just, I'm so bullish on the opportunities in this space. So just wanted to share that since we were just sharing a lot of the sort of how the sausage is made.